So human beings are pretty amazing, really. We just need the environment to innovate and to become amazing people. And when that environment's not there, then quite often we accept mediocrity. And that's what this is about. So I've had the privilege to introduce quite a lot of people over the last 10 months here at Ventures with Agile, and I thought it's probably about time I did some talking myself and showed some of the work that I've been up to over the last 10 months. But I thought I'd introduce myself. So some of you know me, but not everybody here. So this is my son Thomas, and this is Chester, and this is my wife Heather, and that's me talking to some of the people here at a previous Venture Lab. I think this was Imba Oren's talk on SAFE, and that's no relation. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Ventures with Agile, I started Ventures with Agile somewhere September last year because I saw a real need in our organisations for some change. So like many of you here, I've been working in corporations, big sterile environments, and one day I just woke up and thought, you know what, I'm just not happy. And you look around and you think, is it the people? Well, no, the people that I'm working with are great. Well, is it the work? Have I got fed up with the work? Well, no, I love my work. I love what I do. So what is it? Why am I not happy? And then you look around and we're in these sterile environments where we only bring some of ourselves to work. And I thought, you know what? We've got to do something about this. And when you start talking to other people about this, you realise that there's lots of people trying to do lots of things to make our lives better. And so I thought that a community around bringing those people together would be a good thing. And I thought there would be a few people in a pub, and it turned out to be much larger than that. So what we've got at the moment is people all over the world who share a vision of making the lives, our work lives better, which has a knock-on effect of making our whole lives better. So at the moment we are linked up with communities in Sydney, kind of New York, getting there, Stockholm, Brussels. So we're running a course in Prague later on this year. And there's people from all over the world who have got in touch and sharing their experiences. And with that, we're really quite powerful in terms of our knowledge and what we can bring. So we have a hashtag. Feel free to tweet about stuff and tell people about us. That's our hashtag. Or whatever it's called, exactly hashtag. So I wanted to get a sort of a feel for how much Agile everyone here knows, because this is quite, I'm going to race through some of this stuff, and this is quite an advanced group sometimes, but I don't want to leave anyone behind. So if I could get you all to stand up, that would be great. And those of you with little or no experience, if you want to sit down, that would be great. And those who consider that they had some experience. Okay, good. Experienced. Very experienced. And an expert. Brilliant. Oh, damn. I thought I was going to get away with not doing this session. There's no one else who wants to take it. Okay, cool. Okay, so this is one of the themes that I want us to think about. Organisations rise or fall to the level of consciousness of their leaders. So if that statement is true, what's a level? How do we determine a level of consciousness? What does that really mean, right? Well, Jim Collins came up with 5 leadership levels, and he did a lot of research in the 70s, 80s and 90s, looking at the top Fortune 250 companies, and he looked at which one of those companies were going through change and what type of leaders were leading those changes and what effects they had. So we've got these different leadership levels. 1, highly capable individual, makes productive contributions through talent, knowledge, skills, good working habits. 2, contributing team member. Contributes to the achievement of group objectives, works effectively with others in a group setting. Competent manager. Organises people and resources towards effective and efficient pursuit of predetermined objectives. Effective leader. Catalyses commitment to and vigorous pursuit of clear and compelling vision. Stimulates the group to high performance standards. Oh, I forgot, I've got this little cool little thing here. I can even point to it. Self-realising leader. Builds enduring greatness through a paradoxical combination of personal humility plus professional will. So if we look at that again, Jim Collins in his work, what he came up with was that good to great transformations don't happen without level 5 leaders at the helm. They just don't. Okay, so that's something that all of us here are most likely to, in transformations, we're looking at changing organisations for the better. This is the research that he came up with. And this is a cool point here. Humility and will is the level 5 leader. So when we think of humility, what does that mean? So Abraham Lincoln. So obviously we've all heard of Abraham Lincoln, which is pretty much why I chose him. So Henry Adams described him as a quiet, peaceful and shy figure. He had humility. But I don't think anyone could think of him as weak. So 250,000 Confederate and 360,000 Union lives were lost, including his own, in the vision to abolish slavery. He was a level 5 leader. So why aren't we all level 5 leaders? Why do, when we look at our organisations, why do we not all have level 5 leaders in every single organisation? Surely we can just go and get a book, read about level 5 leaders, go and get an MBA, go and do these things and all have level 5 leaders. Why is this not there? And I believe that is because we cannot, it's very difficult for us as human beings to look up the level of consciousness, the level of leadership stack. And what that means is that, and some of this is actually comes from Craig Larman's laws, who he was here earlier on in the year. So what happens is that the terms and the concepts and the ideas, people can understand them, but they get subverted back into whatever level of leadership that you're actually at, and then the leader thinks that they're actually at that level 5 leadership. So I've given this talk several times now, and what amazed me the first times I gave it is as we go through, many individuals came up to me, senior people in organisations, and said, yeah, I know that. We get that. We get all the scaling out stuff. We already do it. And when they left, some of the other people in the audience said, I'm glad they've gone. We can talk freely now. We don't do any of that. And I thought, well, which one is it? And so what it came to me is that we have to look at the behaviours that are actually exhibited, not people's understandings, not what they say, because we can all get it, but it's the behaviours that count. So this picture here is from, it defines the term where cargo cult comes from. In Indonesia in the Second World War, there were the native tribes living on the islands in the, and when the Allies and the Japanese landed, and they used these islands as bases, and all through the war they dropped cargo and supplies, and they used the guides as used the natives as guides, and they would swap medicines and weapons and food. Now, when the war was over, these tribesmen, they no longer had the supplies. The aeroplanes stopped dropping the food. They stopped dropping all of the supplies, and so they built mock airplanes and runways and made headphones out of coconuts, because they hoped that by doing the rituals they would gain the rewards which those rituals bring. But sadly, of course, it didn't happen. So what we're going to do is a 2-minute exercise. If you turn to the person next to you, and what we're going to do is, we've got the levels of leadership up here, so I'll give you a couple of seconds to get organised if there's 3 or 1 person sitting there. I mean, if there's 3 of you, fine, no worries, whatever, it's not, I'm not going to doesn't matter. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 minute to explain to the person next to you which level of leadership you think that you are or you have, and then they can do it back. And it's just 1 minute each, and I'll set a timer somewhere. Brilliant. I thought we had a nice long time here this evening. It's not, so I thought I'd start from the beginning of the universe with my story. We got time, haven't we? So, age of the universe, we reckon, is about 13.8 billion years. Observable universe, 100 billion galaxies. Our Milky Way is one of those galaxies, 200 billion stars. One of those stars is our sun. I don't want to read that out. 3,850,000 quintillion joules hit the Earth's surface every year. The entire energy that we as humans use with all our endeavours, through power stations, through eating, through everything we do, is 475 quintillion joules, a fraction of what hits the Earth's surface. That's just what hits the Earth's surface, not what's radiating out everywhere else. There's an enormous amount of energy in our universe. It's absolutely abundant. We live in an abundant universe. We just can't quite get to it yet. Our Earth, sitting there in our vast universe, 4.5 billion years old. First life on Earth about 3.6 billion years ago, with the first humans somewhere around 1 to 2 million years. The first modern humans around 50,000 years ago, we believe. What's a modern human? When we started forming small family kinships about 100 to 50,000 years ago. So we weren't really organised yet. There were no organisations. We had an undeveloped sense of ego. We still had no sense of separation of ourselves from our environment and nature, and there were high rates of violence and murder, we believe, but instinctual, not premeditated, but because I want that, I'm just going to get it, and if you're in my way, clobber. Pretty much the same as children now, the same mental state of children now up to about 1 year. Around 15,000 years ago, we enter what we call the metaphor of magic. So, we still had no organisations, but our key development here was a sense of separation. And through that, we started worshipping things like the wind and trees and the sun. We managed to group together in forms of about 100 or so people around whatever it was we were worshipping in forms of protection. This is what we believe is experienced today between 3 months and 2 years of children today. Around 10,000 years ago, we started forming a different type of organisation, which we're using the metaphor of a wolf pack. So I'm going to show you a short video against the advice of my wife. She thinks I shouldn't show you this. The reason being is because she thinks it's a bit boring. But it's only 3 minutes long, even if it seems like it's longer. Oh, you can't see that, can you? That's not going to be much good. Can you see that?
We know each other many years. This is the first time we ever came to council. I can't remember the last time you invited me to your house for a cup of coffee. Even though my wife was godmother, we wrote each other. But let's be frank, you never wanted my friendship. And you were afraid to be my pet.
I didn't want to get into trouble.
I understand. If I'm paralyzed in America, have a good trade, make a good living, please protect the children of courts of law, and you don't need a company. But now you come to me and say, I'm calling out and give me justice. So I'm asking for respect. You don't offer friendship. You don't even think to call me Godfather. You simply come into my house and say my daughter's to be married and you ask me for murder. Money.
Just before justice.
That is not justice. Your daughter's not right.
Maybe it's something. She sucks. How much should I pay?
What have I ever done to make you treat me so disrespectful? You come to me in friendship, and the scum that will your daughter will be suffering this very day. And if by chance an honest man like yourself should make enemies, then and then they will fear you.
Be my friend.
Someday, and that day may never come, I'll count on you for your service. But until that day, accept this justice as a gift of my daughter's wedding day.
That's right.
So organisations based on power and fear, strong, ruthless leaders, loyalty and achievement, ruthlessness, short-term thinking and highly reactive. These type of organisations only scale about 3 to 4 degrees from the chief. The downside is there's no individualism, rigid, lack of innovation, mafia. There's time examples today: mafia, tribal militia, street gangs, edge of the law. Now, this is interesting. So these organisations thrive because of the environment that creates them. So here we have low trust, high control, severe threat from the inside and the outside. So threat comes from everywhere. Highly reactive. So if you've got a mob of people attacking your house, maybe this is actually the best organisation. One person decides instantly what to do. About 6,000 years ago, we came up with a new strategy, the conformist or the army type structure. So, command and control. The hierarchy decides the what and the how. The leader skills for a leader: strong, follows the rules, enforces the rules on others. We value stability, right and wrong, and predictability. Large, stable and scalable. Typical examples today: government, military, religious organisations like the Catholic Church. Well-defined structure and service. So the downside to this organisation is there's no individualism, it's rigid, and it's the start of the social mask. So social mask is where you are unable to bring all of your being to work or wherever, and instead we project an image of ourselves, which is our social mask, normally because of peer pressure or some other form of pressure, professionalism or whatever, we have to have this social mask. So this structure brought in the social mask. We have to have that to survive and thrive in this type of organisation. Now, this organisation works best when conflict comes from the outside and there's a strong sense of them and us. So severe threat from the outside, but low threat from the inside. We've now got to the point where we're not bashing each other over the head just because we feel like it or someone seems to have threatened us. There are rules and regulations for dealing with insubordination or lack of loyalty. You're either exercised out of the outfit or whatever. So low threat from the inside. Around 500 years ago, we came up with the machine. There's no one here, is there? Anyone here? No? Phew. Frederic Winslow Taylor, Taylorism. How many people have heard of Taylorism, the concept? Okay, so Frederic Winslow Taylor, he came up with a management system based on optimizing individual parts of the system in the hope that the entire whole would then be optimized. So this is where we get the idea of siloed workers, we get the idea of componentization and specialization of skills. That was his invention, if you like. He brought that, and that worked really well in the Industrial Revolution. Unfortunately, the mindset implies some pretty harsh views to make work. So employees and workers are lazy and must be watched closely. So the interesting thing here is to look at for the behaviours, okay? So we use timesheets, clocking in tools, and ban access to non-business sites or restrict access on our computers. These types of behaviours come from an underlying belief in what we as workers are. Money motivates. Employers will do whatever it takes to make as much money as possible, and we use monetary rewards as bonuses. How many HR policies, retention policies have we got which are based on bonuses? Okay, so they're behaviours which we need to look for when we need to prescribe the tools and things for when we want to try and bring our organisations on. People won't believe. You ask people whether they have these views, they will say no. We don't have those views. Of course, we value our workers. We want to motivate our workers. But look at the behaviours. That's how we can determine what tools we've got. Employees put their own interest ahead of what is best for the organisation. They cannot be trusted. So we limit the information we allow them to see. How many of our organisations are locked down? You can't see this, you can't see that. Lack of trust. Employees are not capable of understanding important matters that affect the economic performance of the company. Therefore, we don't involve employees in decisions. So, we look at the behaviours that we get through here. Employees do not want to be responsible for their actions or decisions, and therefore we must install parent-like bosses to be parent-like. So we're going to do another exercise. So, who wants to shout out a number between 3 and 9? 5, was that? Okay, 5. Right, I need a volunteer. Anyone who wants to volunteer? I'll tell you what we're going to do. No one wants to volunteer for something they don't want to do. Right, here is a pen, and we're going to write down 5 things how you would feel if you worked in an environment where your bosses or you or the environment you're in thought those things about you. And we're just going to shout out some things. So I need a volunteer to write down the 5 things. Come on, who wants to volunteer? Do I have to pick somebody? All you've got to do is write some stuff down. Come on. Brilliant. So how would you feel? People can shout out. How would you feel if you worked in an organisation where your bosses thought that you were lazy and must be watched closely, or that the only thing that you were motivated by was money? What does that make you feel?
Demotivated.
Demotivated.
Quitting.
Sorry?
Quitting.
quitting, resigning, leaving. So we've got constrained. Constrained. Anyone else? Sorry? Frustrated.
It's self-fulfilling. So you end up being lazy and not doing anything and money motivated.
Yeah.
Self-fulfilling.
So self-fulfilling. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Very true. So I think we've got 5 things there. Brilliant. Thank you very much for volunteering. Excellent. So a survey was carried out across different managers, and this is what they thought. So uninspiring, disengaged, poor working environments, old-fashioned management styles, and wanted to leave. So these are the kind of things which we can see we would feel the same way. So these kind of predict and control structures based on these management styles don't work. It's time for something different. So the machine metaphor. Predict and control. So interestingly, things have changed from the command and control. We now say what. We're told what, but not necessarily the how. So we have a bit of autonomy coming in here. It gives us that extra flexibility, and we need that ability to be able to respond to the marketplace. What we value is meritocracy, innovation, accountability. These are the things which drives the corporate mind. Whatever works, we're led by goals, objectives, and beating the competition. This is the machine mind. Large and scalable, subject to market forces. So if we jump down here, we can see that actually we've moved along the scale of threat, and now the threat comes from the market and politics on the inside. None of those threats are mortal. Those threats are now, you lose your job, you lose your income, or maybe you lose some of your pride from politics and bickering and things like that, but no one's going to kill you. I mean, does anyone feel like anyone's going to kill them at their work? Not me. No. We've moved on. So the downsides of this type of organisation is, well, we've seen these already, we've been talking about this, a disempowerment of the workforce, low morale, destructiveness to the environment, extreme commercialism, no value of emotions, feelings or intuition or any type of spiritual growth within these organisations. We don't have those at work in this type of mind. So this works best for uneducated masses of unskilled workers doing repetitive, boring tasks. Not many of us do that. Not many of us have those kind of lives. All the people we look after do that kind of work. Okay, some things are a bit boring, but mostly it's knowledge work. So this is where we finally get to Agile. So what is Agile? So there were various different stages of knowledge within this group. So I'm going to zoom over some of the Agile. I'm not going to go into it too deeply in terms of the team level stuff, but what I will say is that Agile is primarily a software-based process, business processes. And Agile is an umbrella term for a number of different processes, which typically started out as a single team software process. And lately, in the last few years, we've seen these become more popular. So some of these frameworks, or maybe not these frameworks, but there have been larger scaling frameworks around for many years, but really we're only seeing the popularity and these coming in across larger scale Agile frameworks now. So why is this important? Why do we care about Agile transformation? All of the stuff we've talked about up till now has nothing to do with software. So why is it that Agile can change the world? I believe Agile can change the world. So why? And the reason is because of IT. So IT runs the world. Every organisation now has some form of IT, whether it's the military, whether it's government, schools, commercial, banks, you name it, everything runs off IT. And IT is going Agile. And what we find is that you can't just make IT Agile, the organisation has to change too. And so the things that make Agile are changing the world. And I think this sums it up really. These are Maslow's 5 basic needs. And someone on the internet has drawn underneath their Wi-Fi and someone else has added battery pack underneath. I think that sums up kind of our lives in a modern day. So most of you will recognise this. Crossing the chasm. Anyone read or know what I'm talking about if I say the word crossing the chasm? Yeah? Okay, so an idea or a mem or a concept goes through different stages of adoption within our society. So first of all, we have problem definition and we have early adopters. So early adopters will take on anything, so they want to try it out. And then we have this thing here. These double lines here is the chasm. So what the chasm is that you have to reach enough people here, which is about 18% for the vast majority, the early mass adopters, to even consider it. So these are the corporations, these are the big companies who are not multinationals, who are not going to start taking on ideas unless there's a significant body of data to support that they're going to work. And what we see here from this previous exercise that we did was that Scrum, XP practices, notice the practice there, Kanban and coaching and some of these things, they have crossed the chasm. We're seeing this now across all of the organisations. The Agile survey, version 1 Agile survey that came out, it was 96, I think it was, I can't remember, it was 94 or 96% of organisations are trying or have adopted Agile in some form. So this is the reason why it's important. It's happening everywhere. So the Agile appeals to the machine mind because it's empirical in nature. Transparency, inspect and adapt, the 3 pillars of Scrum. So anything that is iterative or anything goes was the mantra of the machine mind. And Scrum does that. It does it better than long traditional processes. And so because it's more competitive, it's actually able to do better in the market. So when we looked at that threat model there, there's 2 threats. Can you remember what the 2 threats were of the machine mind? The 2 things that can threaten you. Sorry? Politics, exactly, internal politics. Market forces, exactly. This addresses both of those, but especially market forces. So Scrum, I'm not going to dig too deeply into Scrum, but one thing it does is very quickly, incrementally, gives you shippable product. People like that. So this is borrowed from Rad Tap. Thank you very much. So what we have is Agile is actually made up of different levels, different layers, if you like. So at the bottom here, one thing about this diagram, the bigger the circle, the more important it is. So what you've got is here is more visible, less powerful, but less visible and more powerful. The tools and processes and practices are very easily seen. And when you're thinking of a machine, what you want is parts to put in that machine that are easily understood and fit in well. These do that. So these can be adopted with any type of behaviour. So at any place, you can adopt the practices and processes. So this is why Agile has taken off, in my opinion, Scrum, etc., because you can adopt it anywhere. It doesn't matter. You don't have to have prerequisite behaviours. Principles and values map to motivated individuals. It requires structural and cultural change. So you can't get these straight away without having done some work beforehand. And if you understand what those behaviours are, then you can drive this. Now the mindset maps to empowerment and moves towards a family community, and we'll talk a bit about that later. You can't move up this unless behaviours exist already, and you can adopt and encourage those behaviours, but you won't get there if you just try and apply it on top. You'll get the cargo cult. So again, borrowed from Rad Tap. What we see is the start of an organisational chart change. The stand-up is a round circle. It's not the pyramid structure that we've seen before. And at the beginning of the journey here in the machine mind, we see the start, this is a bit of a mouthful, self-motivated, autonomous, generalising specialist teams. Now, does anyone here understand what I'm talking about? Okay, let me explain. So, I'll start from the beginning. Self-motivated is fairly explanatory. Autonomous, meaning the ability to make your own decision, to decide upon the how. And generalizing specialist is this thing down here, the T-shaped person. You have a broad set of knowledge so you can apply yourself to different things, but you have a deep understanding. So we're still maintaining some of the specialism at this point, and we have a broad level to be able to pick things up. You won't get flow otherwise. The reason we have this is because you won't get the flow through the system. So what we do when we first start out is we change the team level agile, right? We change the team. But what about the rest of the organisation? So actually, before we go on to that, so what we've got here is the ability, this is the reason why it's market successful, is the ability to make decisions locally. And we have to be able to trust our teams to do that. So we had big command and control structures, and we're realizing that more effective to the market forces is the ability to make decisions locally, close to where the change in the customer is, or whatever it is that's going on. So I'm going to show you a short video, if the whole thing doesn't blow up again. And this is an example of where localized decision making is way more important than centralized control. What we're going to do, whilst the machine's rebooting, is we're going to do a little 4-minute exercise. Mine's a bit of a crap machine, so it's going to take about 4 minutes to boot up. So we're going to do a 4-minute exercise where, again, you can turn to the person next to you, and what we're going to do is you're going to tell the person next to you for 2 minutes some of the most important things or the key things that you think that you've learnt so far. And then after 2 minutes, we'll swap over, and that'll be 4 minutes. So apologies for the technical failures. I think I've managed to get the laptop back up and going. I've put some more coal in it, crank the handle. So just to remind everyone what this video was about, it's about where decision making locally is more important sometimes than decision making in a centralized way. Hopefully we have sound.
Check 15.9, request contact on maintain 15,000.
Maintain 15,000, Captain 1649.
Cactus 15.9, turn left lane 270.
Cactus 1539, 8 birds 2,
Okay, you need to return a low. Turn left heading up 220.
220.
Copy departure, set emergency returning. It's 15.9. He third strike, he lost all engine, he lost the thrust in the engine, so he's returning immediately.
Cactus 1529, which engines?
He lost thrust in both engines, he said.
Got it.
Cactus 15.9, we can get it to you. Do you want to try away in 113?
What we made it to
Cactus 15.9, it's going to be less traffic to runway 31.
Unable.
Okay, what do you need to land? Do you want to try to go to T-Bird?
Yes.
T-Bird, Empire, actually, we're going to Park Sky Mercy inbound.
Hey, guys.
Cactus 15.9 will be short watch and bridge, wants to go to the airport right now.
Also, I like our check. Does he need assistance?
Yes, the first strike. Can I get him in for runway 1?
Runway 1, that's good.
Cactus 15.9, turn right 280 to land runway 1 at T-Bird.
We can't do it.
Okay, which runway would you like at T-Bird?
We're going to be low.
I'm sorry, say again, Cactus? Cactus 15.9, radar contact is lost. You also got Newark Airport up to 2 o'clock in about 7 miles. Eagle 54718, turn left in 210.
401, 2718. I think he said he's going to the Hudson.
Cactus 15.9, Houston.
Again, some people in the room might recognize these slides. Thank you again. So what we find when we adopt team-level Agile is that it's really good. It adopts to market forces really quickly, but we don't really see the benefits of it. And why? Because the rest of the organisation needs to change too, or it'll fight the team, and there'll be organisational impediments, if you like. So the team will raise things out of their retrospectives, and those things will be bigger than what the team can fix on their own. And those things are things like the culture, the customs, the hidden values, the infrastructure, stuff which is difficult for those teams to fix. So something needs to change. Either we need to stop doing Agile or the rest of the organisation needs to respond. But we know how good Agile is. We've seen how powerful localised decision making can be. So at this stage of development, what we're looking at is a machine mind who has seen something that's working. It really works well. The processes and the tools are there in place and we can comprehend those, but we don't see the benefit from it unless we get the values and the principles and things to work as well, and ultimately the mindset. So how do we go about that? We look at the behaviours of what's happening in our teams and we see things like there's no DevOps, there's no continuous improvement, there's no... you look at the impediments coming out and look at the behaviours and you'll see whereabouts the team is. So at this level, what there are is there's certain frameworks. Now we've seen some of these frameworks over the last year through this community and obviously people, you'll have come across them at work. So the Disciplined Agile Delivery Framework is a goal-based delivery framework where you map on, it's based on empirical data of where the organisations are right now and gives us a way to look at where the organisation is and gives us a number of choices about how to improve those localised spots, those localised problems within the industry. And so something like the Disciplined Agile Delivery works really well at the early stages of Agile adoption. So if you haven't come across that, I'd recommend having a look at some of the goal-based things. They give you little nuggets of good things to improve, but it's not really a scaling framework as such. It doesn't give you the big picture, it just gives you ways to improve at this early stage of Agile adoption. So I'm sure most of you will recognise this picture. This is the Scaled Agile Framework big picture. And what you see here are the 3 layers. So we've got team-based Agile down the bottom, and it's pretty much based upon Scrum and XP with a few other things to make it work within the program level. And the program level is a bunch of teams working together and coordinating over, say, a quarter period. And you have specific roles. So SAFE has 17 new roles, which it brings to the organisation. So people who like roles, predictability, hierarchical structures, which is where we are on our journey through organisational history, we've got that. It maps nicely into our organisational structures of where we are. Hence why SAFE is one of the most popular scaling frameworks. And if I'm not going to try because there's too many slides, but if I went back to that crossing the chasm, you see that SAFE is actually a lot further on than LESS, DAD, and some of the other scaling frameworks that have come out. It's much more popular, and we can see that because the bulk of the organisations that we have now in the world are at the behavioural level that appeals to this framework. So I just wanted to go over what the Agile values were. Honesty, openness, transparency, courage, respect, trust. These things I've taken out of different processes, out of XP and all the various different processes. And what we see is that we're starting to realise on this part of the journey, so once you adopt SAFE, you look at DAD, you look at these things, you've already adopted the team level stuff, you're starting to realise that people are part of the process. It's not something that is done to us, but that we are part of the process. Now, once those behaviours start exhibiting that people are part of the process, individuals and interactions over processes and tools, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, these are things we know, if you've been doing Agile, you hear this all the time. This is people over process. We're all part of the process. And once that is starting to be understood, then how do you oil a machine which is made of people? Well, some of you recognise this chap, Dan Pink. So Dan Pink's done a lot of work on motivation. And what he came up with his research is that motivation of knowledge workers is not actually by money. We all need a bit of money, but after that, there's actually 3 things that motivate us: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Am I going to attempt another video? I will attempt another video because it's a good one. So purpose.
What makes you itch?
Oh, hang on.
What sort of situation?
What makes you itch? Luckily, it's not really about itching.
What makes you itch? What sort of a situation would you like? Let's suppose, I do this often in vocational guidance of students. They come to me and say, well, we're getting out of college and we have the faintest idea what we want to do. So I always ask the question, what would you like to do with money when I want you? How would you really enjoy spending your life? Well, it's so amazing. As a result of our kind of educational system, crowds of students say, well, we'd like to be painters, we'd like to be poets, we'd like to be writers, because everybody knows you can't earn any money that way. Or another person says, well, I'd like to live an outdoors life and ride horses. I say, you want to teach in a riding school? Let's go through with it. What do you want? When we finally got down to something which the individual says he really wants to do, I will say to him, you do that. And forget the money. Because if you say that getting the money is the most important thing, you will spend your life completely wasting your time. You'll be doing things you don't like doing in order to go on living, that is, to go on doing things you don't like doing, which is stupid. Better to have a short life that is full of what you like doing than a long life spent in a miserable way. And after all, if you do really like what you're doing, it doesn't matter what it is, you can eventually become a master of it. The only way to become a master of something is you really will it. And then you'll be able to get a good feel for what it is. So we don't worry too much. Somebody's interested in everything. Anything you can be interested in, you'll find others in. But it's absolutely stupid to spend your time doing things you don't like in order to go on spending things you don't like, doing things you don't like, and have to teach your children to follow in the same track. See, what we're doing is we're bringing up children in everything to live the same sort of life we live, in order that they may justify themselves and find satisfaction in life by bringing up their children, to bring up their children to do the same thing, so it's all wretch and no vomit. It never gets there. And so, therefore, it's so important to consider this question, what do I desire?
So what is the purpose? What's the point? Why do we turn up to work? Well, Agile gives us quite a convenient way to figuring out what our business actually does. What's the point of it? It's amazing how many people I speak to who don't really understand what their companies do. We all know our companies make money, but that's not the reason why they exist. The reason why they exist is because somewhere they make value. They're doing that value thing for other people and they get money as a result. And Agile gives us that ability through our product vision, our epics, features. These are value items. They're not requirements. They're definitions of value. And when we understand that, we can align around it. And when we have a purpose which we align around that we can get up in the morning for, then we become truly powerful and motivated. And Agile gives us that. So the second type of motivation from Dan Pink's work is autonomy, the how. So we had a look a bit earlier on about the circle. So just for those of you who aren't that familiar with Agile, most of the processes, so Scrum, for example, has a daily meeting of about 15 minutes long where the entire team stands in a circle, and it's an alignment meeting where everybody can align around moving towards their goal, their purpose for that short period of time, be it 2 weeks or 4 weeks. So what we see here is which one is the manager? Which one is telling them what to do? Well, you can't tell. And actually, the manager, I think, is one of these guys here.
I think the manager is a guy,
This guy. The only one with a tie. Which one? This guy?
No. Use the bottom.
This man? Here. Oh, here. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Could be a product owner.
Consultant. So, autonomy. We start to see autonomy within the team level. So at this stage, we've got the beginnings of self-management in the organisation. So we're actually starting to get self-management, which is great. We've got loads of motivation from that. And this is all within the Scrum, XP, Kanban. Mastery. So mastery is another form of motivation. In knowledge workers, what we want is to be good at what we do. We take immense pride in that. People have a whole, the open source community, create amazing things. People are learning. Why are we all here? Why are we here? Look how nice it is outside. In fact, do you know what? I think we should all actually stand up for a couple of seconds and give ourselves all a round of applause. Right? Come on, stand up. Do you know, when you stand up, 20% more oxygen comes to the brain, which gives you a 20% more ability to learn. And I think that we should give ourselves all a round of applause because we are mastering something. We've come here. Look how nice it is outside. We could all be having a beer, right? So I'll hurry up, right? But, yeah, well done. Right? Okay, I'll sit down now. Okay, so mastery and purpose and these things, they're not set in the organisational structure. The way that we achieve those things is through communities of practice. So if we create communities of practice within our work, then we can find mastery. And those communities go across the boundaries of our organisational chart. The real organisational chart is the person you pick up the phone to because you know they've got an answer. It's the person who is going to sort something out for you, or you talk to somebody else, or someone who's working on the same project as you but is under a different manager. Those are the real organisations. And when we form communities at our workplace, that's how we get things done. They may be informal, but within the Agile process and organisational transformation, we're looking at making those explicit. But most communities fail. Now, I've set up communities in places before, and when I go, they disappear. Now, why is that? And the reason is because we don't fund them, okay? So we need to value them. So it's another behaviour which we can look at. People want motivation. All our staff are motivated. But what behaviours are we doing to motivate those people, to motivate our staff, to motivate our colleagues? So Tom DeMarco's work on Slack, the book Slack. So what he says in there, for the studies that he's done, is he found that the optimal efficiency for utilisation of the workforce is 80%. That's 4 days a week. So the other day of a week, we spend doing community, working out, doing your own projects, those kind of things. If we don't fund those within the organisation, they will not happen. And our communities will just disappear. And all of the effort we put in as coaches, well, it's a waste of time, really. So once we have community, once we have gone past the organisational chain, we can start to look at the system as a whole. We can truly align around product, but only after we have transcended the organisational boundary through community. So I've been in places where we've tried to implement these types of thinking. So anyone recognises these books, they're fairly common books. They're about systems thinking. It's about, rather than optimising things in the Taylorism way, about optimising every part and hoping the system becomes optimised, what we're looking at is taking a system view, and you actually realise that maybe I need to de-optimise that team. I need to be able to shuffle a few people around at will. But you can't do that. You can't bring in these ideas until you have community and an ability to talk and communicate across the organisational chart. So this is another behaviour which we can look at before bringing in things. So as coaches, we get frustrated because they just don't get it. Whereas actually what it is just that you're bringing the wrong tools in. They're not the stage of the organisation that we're at is not exhibiting the behaviours that apply for these tools. So once we have that, once we've got those in place and we have community, then we can start thinking about other tools. So large-scale Scrum, we had Craig Larman here, and I know that Craig and Baz are coming back later on in the year to talk about large-scale Scrum. So large-scale Scrum requires a lot of organisational change. You have to reorganise the entire organisation around product. You're actually getting rid of a lot of the silo teams. But how can we expect people to get rid of these silo teams if they're still thinking in a very hierarchical Taylorism way and have those underlying beliefs and exhibit the behaviours which show that? We can only do that once we've achieved the other things, the other community aspects within the organisations to allow these to happen so that behaviours can take place, so that things like large-scale Scrum can actually take hold and they have a chance. And now we see here the hierarchy from the chart is different. We still have a hierarchy, but we have much larger circles and many more circles. So the organisational structure has flattened at this point, okay? And we're aligning around product with motivated people. So I'm going to miss this one. So community and family. So at this point, we now move on to the next type of organisational structure. And this is an organisational structure already exists. It's been around for about 60 years. And it's community and family is the metaphor. Some of you are old enough to remember these guys. That's not my Christmas. So the family type organisation, it still has hierarchical structure, but the focus now becomes on empowerment. So the term servant leadership, which we've probably heard in Agile speak, this is the place where now it can start to really flourish. Before this, servant leadership meant stuff, and we kind of thought we were doing it, but only until we get to this stage can we actually achieve servant leadership. We have inspirational purpose, multiple stakeholder perspectives, and now we can, the what, the how, and the why is determined by product. It's determined by the reaction to the marketplace, not all upfront planning. So there's always some upfront planning because we need coordination and things, but we're aligned around product at this point and that inspirational purpose, which comes from value. So here, this is really interesting. So at this point, when we start to really trust each other, when servant leadership, so servant leadership for those people who are unsure of what I'm talking about, is where the leaders create the environments for the workforce or your staff or whatever to actually be able to do their jobs. So to sum it up, I would say that before servant leadership exists, then the leadership or your team lead or whoever it is responsible for the results. In servant leadership, the team leader is responsible for providing the environment for the team to generate the results. And we do that only if we can trust. And so at this point, we start seeing the dropping of the social mask. Not completely, but we can start to bring emotions to work. We can really relate to each other as human beings, and we can start to trust each other. So these organisations exist: Southwest Airlines, Ben & Jerry's, Hotel Chocolat, other family type led. They have a vision. So the downsides of this type of organisation is that they are easy to fall back to lower levels of trust. So I mean, I'm not going to mention any names, but I know at least one organisation that people have worked on here, which have manage to achieve this, have a change of leadership and fall straight back, because empowerment implies that one person, through the generosity or wisdom, is bestowing their power on those beneath them, and they can take it away at any moment. But that's still one good step. If you have a benevolent or a level 5 leader, so not on this slide, but at this point is the first time when you need a level 5 leader. So previously, we had any organisation, the army, anything, could have a level 5 leader of humility and will, but this type of organisation needs a level 5 leader to maintain its state of a family structure. Low-level threat from the inside and a lower threat from the marketplace, because now we're all aligned around purpose, able to adapt more. We're moving up the scale here. I missed that. So the achievements of this type of organisation, empowerment, inspirational purpose, is the first time we have the why, the real why of what we're doing. We've got that purpose, multiple stakeholder perspective, because we're aligned around purpose. And these type of things. So structural change we have, removal of silo teams, system thinking tools, large-scale Scrum, theory of constraints. All these type of things can now apply because we're aligned around product for the first time. Without these things, they're meaningless, really, if you haven't got that alignment. And also now, interestingly, XP values. So before we were doing XP, we thought we were, but now we can actually get the values. Respect, servant leadership, equality. These are all things that have been in XP for the last 20 years, or however long it's been, a long time. So once we get to this stage of empowerment and that organisation's functioning, then we get to what I've called the self-realised organisation. And these organisations exist now as well. Okay, so the self-realised organisation. So here, the organisational structure actually changes once again to a more fractal structure. So this is mirroring nature and the way that nature responds to change. So here we have a complete focus on higher purpose, motivation, complete self-management, wholeness of the individual and organisation. So wholeness meaning you bring your whole self to work. So organisations like this are typically characterised by people bringing their dogs to work or having a crash at the workplace, because there's no mask of professionality, because we're trusted, we're aligned around purpose, and we're good people doing the right thing and working hard. The trust is there. Everyone is a leader. Everyone has power. So I heard there was a great analogy of if you have two seeds, and one is a mushroom, one is an oak tree. If you plant them in the ground, if they're given the right environment, the oak tree seed, the acorn, will grow into an amazing oak tree, and the mushroom seed will grow into an amazing mushroom. They're very different things with completely different lifespans, everything else, but given the right environment, they will flourish to the best of their ability. And these type of organisations focus primarily on that, making sure that the workers flourish around their purpose. Infinitely scalable, because it's fractal, pulled by demand. Examples today, Zappos, Patagonia, Morningstar, Favi, and many others. The whole organisation becomes a T-shaped organisation, so generalising specialists, people, what they call surge, will move from one organisation. Job roles no longer are identified with who you are, so there's a flexibility and dropping of the ego in these places because there's no longer any need to project a status out in front of you, because you're valued and trusted, and therefore job roles are not something which you identify with, the people in these organisations would identify with, because their job role is whatever the need's doing right now to the greater purpose. The downside is it requires quite a level of maturity for individuals to work. So the research that I've looked at is that what happens is that peer pressure and the way that people work and the general motivation and levels of motivation keep people from politics and sort of petty kind of gossiping and things like that, because there's a real sense of motivation. The other downside is that these are pioneer organisations. They haven't been around very long. So we're still discovering, as a humanity, is still discovering how these work and how they adapt and how they work together. And now we see ourselves right at the end here, highly motivated, balanced life and abundance. Okay, so we've talked mostly about that. So this is a diagram I downloaded from the Sociocracy website, which is, Sociocracy is a form of structure. So it's this fractal structure of organisation. So we had, so James Priest came and talked here last month about Sociocracy, a new form of structure. And I downloaded that from the website, and I also downloaded this after a Google search. So we can see that it truly is representative of fractal structure. And these are some of the organisations which actually exist in these structures. So, I'll tell you a little story. Shahzad Kazam was a financial analyst at AES. He was what you might call a junior analyst. He's born in Pakistan, and he decided that, so AES is one of this type of organisation, or used to be. It's fallen back into a different structure, but for about 15 years, AES operated in this self-realised organisation. They had about 50,000, I think it was 50,000 employees. So it's scalable. So Shahzad Kazam, he decided that what he wanted to do was open a power station, to create a power station in his native Pakistan. Now, he went through a process called the advice process, where what he does is he has to talk to all those people who his idea will affect within the company. So you can imagine a big power station will affect a lot of people. So it took a bit of time, and he would seek that advice process. And they have a CEO, which is not a power structure, but a way of collaboration. And he talked to his CEO, and he talked to other people, and they were skeptical that someone of his experience could really create and convince, and all the political staff and everything else, create a power station in Pakistan. But with this type of organisation, as long as you've sought the advice process and no one can see any reason why you can't do it, then he has the right to do it. His job title just changes, and he went to Pakistan. 6 months later, he invites his CEO to speak with the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and 2.5 years later, a £700 million power plant is running. And that's it. So what we can see from this is that people are valued, and no matter where you are, you have the chance to make your dreams. They have they truly believe in abundance. The universe is abundant, and you can see this by the behaviours that they exhibit. So Zappos, if you phone up for a pair of shoes, they're a shoe sales company, they make shoes. If you phone up and they don't have a shoe that you want, they will refer you to 3 competitors. There's no charge in that. They do it because they want to help their customer, and they don't care about the money. They want to serve the customer as their primary need, and they'll just pass you straight to a competitor. So the Transcendental Organisation is one that I've made up. And I'm going to be honest about it. I don't know when this organisation will exist, or whether it won't exist, or maybe it will, but it seems to me as a conclusion, so I've added this on at the end. So semi or fully permeable organisational boundaries. So we saw with Zappos, we're starting to see the behaviour where an organisation no longer thinks of itself as having a boundary. It's willing to send things to competitors for the benefit of those around. Now, if there were more organisations like that, I could see a transcendence out of the organisational structure, and that human beings could actually work together regardless of the organisation that we all work in. Being part of something and having a higher purpose, loss of identity. So at this point, we would reach total trust, humanity working together. And then maybe we'll be able to reach that limitless potential, both internally within ourselves and externally within the world and the universe that we find ourselves living in. So I won't go through all this now, but this is a recap of some of the behaviours, the high-level behaviours and the frameworks of the different types. So I can make this available if people are interested in looking at this later. So it's just some things that I've mapped out. Now, I've mapped out a lot lower-level behaviours into frameworks and tools as well. And this is the only time I'm going to plug it, but I've got a 2-day course, and I'm kind of running a scaling framework through that, and all these different frameworks and how these things map. Thank you very much.